Hello, Whitewater students. Rick Olling here again. This video is going to serve as a part two or sequel to the first week of class introduction to our themes and our books video. So let me quickly solve two quick mysteries. All right, I put two pictures on uh, the top of the syllabus. Um, on this side over here is Marilyn Monroe in the last movie that she made that was really completed and released. That was called The Misfits. Very interesting role, a little bit more complex than the role she had been given. A little bit more sadness in it, which was nice. She had sought to be able to portray a sadder character before, and it was something Hollywood had not been comfortable with. And over here, kind of the opposite, right? A self-portrait of Käthe Kollwitz, the German artist who I told you who had been trapped by circumstances in Hitler's Germany and who died a month before the war was over. So, two interesting imaginations of our time. Two people who would seem, on the surface, to be complete opposites. Kollwitz, who was this sculptor and printmaker, had worked in Germany as an artist, but was definitely not seen as some kind of a particularly feminine figure. She had, in fact, entered fields like printmaking and sculpture that had been traditionally all male in the 1900s, early on. And Monroe, of course, mid-century, being a lot of people's image of the feminine. So we'll show how, well, we'll look into and see how, in fact, uh, some of their visions of life overlapped uh, in surprisingly uh, close manner in certain ways. Okay, our first writer that we'll be reading quite a bit by Joyce Carol Oates. Been talking about this book. You guys have the paperback, which is a lot cheaper, and it looks a little bit different, but it does feature the same photograph. So, Joyce Carol Oates, uh, Lonesome. All right. This book is about the painter up on the wall here, um, Max Beckmann, Beckmann, a German painter. This book is by Stephen Wagner, who is a man who uh, bought quite a few Beckmann paintings, which really helped. Beckmann never had an awful lot of money, and it really helped him a lot that he has such a loyal patron. And Wagner also writes about Beckmann beautifully. It's kind of interesting. I think he was perhaps a doctor as a profession. Um, but not only did he help support Beckmann, his own writings are quite eloquent. But what I'm interested in here is he tells a story about how in 1933, Stephen Wagner was living in Germany. He heard that Beckmann, an artist he didn't know so well at this time, had an exhibit in a small German city. And so he drove there with a friend, and they arrived like on a Saturday morning, expecting to kind of, be able to participate in the opening of this new art exhibit by Max Beckmann. And instead, it was everything was shut down. And they did get a hold of the gallery owner, and he explained that the exhibit had been shut down, and that all the work was stored in the basement of the gallery. And seeing how much of a fan Stephen Lackner was, the gallery owner said, "All right, I will let you look at the work." And they went down to the basement, and the only lighting down there was a bare bulb. So we will look at the paintings of Max Beckmann, which are already haunting and unsettling, but I imagine looked at in a basement under a single stark bare bulb would have been even more unnerving. So what's our mystery here? Who is Max Beckmann that he would have an exhibit and then have it shut down in 1933 with no recourse to, petition for a new decision or something? This was done. And in fact, the gallery owner was taking a risk in allowing Stephen Lackner to see the paintings in the basement. So, one mystery that we'll return to. Uh, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the story of Iphigenia. It's part of Greek myth, but it's definitely not a part of Greek myth that is going to Be featured in a book of Greek myths for kids. Iphigenia was a Greek princess, um, and she is called to a place called Aulis. Her father writes her a letter and says to come. She'll marry Achilles when she gets there, he says. She goes, and when she gets there, it turns out that, in fact, um, somehow the Greeks have offended the goddess Artemis, and she is demanding the sacrifice of Iphigenia, this teenage girl. Her father, Agamemnon, is the leader of the Greek forces. They are supposed to sail to Troy and try to get Helen back. Helen ran off or was abducted by uh, Paris of Troy. And so it's kind of unfair, you know. Iphigenia, who really had nothing to do with the war at all, has to sacrifice her life. Now, what interests me the most about this is that my favorite Greek playwright, Euripides, tells that story, and he makes you feel uncomfortable with child sacrifice in a way that a lot of writers from that time do not. Um, and at the end, it's not clear what happens. Everyone believes that Iphigenia is taken up to the sacrificial altar and killed. The winds do begin to blow. The Greeks are able to sail to Troy, and the rest is history, as they say. Um, Clytemnestra, the mother, will sail home and plan carefully to murder her husband as soon as he sets foot uh, in their country again. But she does. You guys may know that story. Leads to a whole series of murders. But Iphigenia seems to not have died. In this play, Iphigenia among the Taurians, sometimes known as Iphigenia in Taurus, um, it seems that she was whisked away across from across the sea and all, and she ends up on the coast of the Black Sea, northern coast, so kind of far from Aulis, where she is in a temple. I'm going to leave the mystery there. We'll find out what happens to her in uh, Iphigenia among the Taurians. I will say this, which I find so fascinating from my work, actually my work on Joyce Carol Oates. There's an overlap here. A lot of Greek plays I thought were just tragedies. There are definitely a lot that, like Oedipus, that are tragedies. But there's also some that this Euripides writes that are romances. And that means like Shakespeare's Winter's Tale, that it's more about tragedy survived, uh, tragedy since outlived, which given Norma Jean's working class background, um, Joyce Carol's working class background, I also think back on my childhood and about how I could tell that my working class grandparents struggled harder to survive. To me, that's a really central story of ours. How hard it is to stay alive, not just stories about how when the king dies, everything falls to pieces. I like this other genre, romance, as well. So we'll find out what happens to Iphigenia uh, among the Taurians, as well as uh, her other fate. So really quickly here, I better move faster. Uh, we are going to be looking into jazz a little bit, jazz vocalists. I think jazz vocalists are a little bit easier to enjoy than, say, experimental bebop jazz. And I was in the record store one day, and I kind of educated myself on jazz and jazz vocalists. And so I was simply perusing through the J's at the record store, and I think I was looking for Etta James, who is a blues singer. And I saw this album thinking it was Etta James. I didn't look quick. I looked quickly at the name and simply thought I'd never seen it before. She did look quite different, actually, but I, was figuring that they used to do that all the time on these labels, change the woman's look from record to record. So I set it aside and thought this person was kind of staring at me, glaring at me a little bit. And I realized as I was reading it was she was sending out this very strong message. I'm not Etta James. She's not, right? She's Etta Jones. So I do have a number of Etta James CDs and LPs that I like. but I got completely obsessed with Etta Jones. I love her. I bought every CD, uh, every LP I could find, and I've researched her life more. I think we'll do a little bit of research into her life down the line. But um, let me tell this one anecdote, and we'll call this a night then. So I had put on Twitter uh, this factoid that Etta Jones had been an elevator operator in hard times during her career. That because she never was as famous or successful as some of the more pop music style singers. Jazz doesn't usually achieve that kind of popularity. That when she wasn't touring or hadn't just released a record and wasn't garnering sales from that, that she would have to take other work, and that she had worked as a elevator operator back in the day. Um, and I had this terrible feeling after I put it on Twitter that maybe it wasn't Etta Jones. Maybe it was one of the many, many female, often black jazz singers that I've been collecting over the last 20 years. Could have been Lorez Alexandria, Ernestine Anderson, Shirley Horn, quite a few. And because my dad was a historian and my mom also had this wonderful regard for scholarship and getting the facts right, I thought, oh no, here I've done it. I've sent this mistake onto the universe. Um, and it actually made me feel bad when I saw people liked it. So I thought, well, I'm not sure. So that's why I love the internet. Um, I went online and did a careful search, and I found obituaries for Etta Jones, and they're oftentimes the most reliable in terms of facts because the family's overseeing the obituary oftentimes, and it's going to appear in print, and people want to get everything right. It's not a good time to get anything wrong. And sure enough, there in the obituaries, it mentioned that she had worked as an elevator operator. And so there you go. I feel vindicated. I also let you know that this semester we're going to be doing a lot of research tasks. I'm not going to make you write a long research paper, but I really do like to take um, the whole question of reliable sources and good information very seriously. It makes a huge difference. So this is another picture of Etta Jones, and I would enjoy this one because she looks so sweet natured here. She is definitely not somebody, not a diva. When you hear stories about her, or when you see her interview, you can tell that she was probably a very, very mellow person to work with. And I think, well, too, if you had gotten on an elevator, somewhere in New York or Philadelphia, and you were greeted by a person with this sweet face and this friendly uh, manner, wouldn't you feel like you were the luckiest person in the world? So, what do you think? Do you think that Etta Jones secretly sang to herself when she was in the elevator and there was no one else there? Some consolation in that thought, I think. All right. I will talk to all of you soon. Enjoy the mysteries.